various religions. I mean, I love the coverage of the mosque where people voted in Iowa, and how 99% of the people there, many of whom were immigrants, how they voted and supported Bernie Sanders. But that took outreach from the campaign. That it did not just magically happen. I think that he has changed, and I also think that the term identity politics has been so distorted since we originally coined it. And I should say, Amy, I should tell you what we meant by it. What we meant in 1977 by identity politics is that Black women have a right to determine our own political agendas, period. That's all that we meant. All the things that have been attached to the term identity politics in succeeding decades, that's not what we were talking about. And the reason that we said that back then is because of the fact that it was not thought that Black women had any particular political issues or concerns that needed to be addressed and worked on. So there's a title of a book, you may have heard of it, it's my book. All the women are white, all the Blacks are men, but some of us are brave. And that was the perspective back then, that Black politics and Black liberation agendas were one size fit all for both Black men and women. And it's not, of course, I mean, all Black people have things in common and have realities in common and injustices in common that we need to address. And women also, regardless of race, have issues in common, like violence against women, for example, the access to reproductive freedom. But what we were saying is that there are things that we experience who are people who are both and simultaneously Black and women, and also other identities, working class. Many of us were lesbians in the Combahee River Collective, so we were really looking at systems of oppression as they interlocked. And subsequently, Kim Crenshaw, the legal scholar, came up with the concept of intersectionality. But as I said, we weren't bad-mouthing or putting down anyone who wasn't our identical mirror image. That was not what we meant. We just said we have a right to shape our own political identity. Our own political agenda that comes out of our political identity. That's what we meant by identity politics.
Can you speak to young activists who work around issues of identity politics and what it...
Hello, everyone. You are live with King Sigma on this February 21st, 2020, Friday. I hope everyone is having a great Friday morning. It's payday. We're in the middle of tax season. I know some of you are about to get that nice refund this weekend. Some of you got spring break trips planned. I know that's always been something I've done over the years, taking a spring break trip, but I won't be doing it this year because I'm investing all of my money in some side businesses this year. But for those that are lucky enough to be able to take out tax funds and go do some traveling, choose wisely. And I hope that you have a lot of fun. So that's one of the best things about the end of February. We close out Black History Month, and then we go into the first month of spring, while the rest of the country, Midwest, Northeast, we thaw out. So I always look forward to March. And, again, historically, I would usually take a trip during spring break, but I won't be able to this year because I'm trying to put my funds back into some side businesses. So today, what I want to deal with is this issue of identity politics, the sexual contract, and the social contract. But first, I want to shout out OG Bobby Johnson, 85. Appreciate your support. He says, been rocking with you since DJ Kid. Every video you drop is informative. Keep up the awesome work, brother. I appreciate that, OG Bobby Johnson, man. I definitely try to have conversations that I enjoy. And if other brothers out there find that it's informative, then that's a win for me, because that's all really it is. All I do is just talk about things that I would typically read on any given day. And ever since Mike V sent me this video of Barbara Smith a week ago, I had to replay it a couple times to really listen to what she said, because I had never heard of this woman before, Barbara Smith. And I'm like, who is this woman? And come to find out, I hadn't heard about her because, as Charles Merchant said in the chat, a lot of these Black girl magic feminists and Black lesbians from the 1970s, they created this movement, and then they disappeared from public eye over the last 40 years. Because what happened is that while the civil rights movement was going on, while the Black Power movement was going on, and all these different social revolutions in the late 60s and the 70s, they succeeded because what they wanted was to get the government to pay attention to them and to start funding their initiatives. And the Black girl magic feminists succeeded where many failed. Organizations like the Black Panthers, their movements were cut short and infiltrated. But one of the movements that they did not infiltrate and that was doing their bidding was the Black girl magic feminists. And so this group that existed pretty much from the late 1960s until just about 1980, they were very vocal. They were protesting. They were out there advocating. They were lobbying. So they actually ended up getting what they wanted by signing an agreement with the Democratic Party and getting a certain amount of grants issued to them and different kinds of jobs with universities. And that's why we had this rise in gender studies over the last 30 years, something that's useless to you and I, but it's very useful to elite Black women. And they're simp advocates as well in pushing their agenda forward, and they've been successful. But their time is up now. Their time is really up, because now you have a new generation of young Black men that are starting to investigate things that we just didn't know about. I'm going to be honest, man. I never took a gender studies class. I never paid too much attention to feminism until Me Too. I'm being brutally honest about that. It was actually Me Too and them going after different rich people in Hollywood, specifically Black men, that really brought gender studies and this feminist movement to my attention. It was just something that existed that I just never paid attention to. Shout out to the brother, Big Poke Dog. He says, salute King Sigma. Appreciate you, man. And you dropping in and giving your support on your lunch break. So, you start investigating some of these writings from these feminists in the 70s and the 80s. And what stood out to me is that many people say that the white feminist was the one that put the black woman up to it. But I'm not so sure about that, because the more that I'm digging into this history, I'm coming to find out that it was more black feminists writing prior to Dr. Carol Pateman's The Sexual Contract. Now, we've all talked about the sexual contract before, and how the sexual contract was a declaration of independence by the white feminists from what they call the white patriarchy, right? So they call male-led households being a norm the white patriarchy. So that book came out in 1988, and that's considered like the most important book written at that time, because it was an open declaration that, hey, you know, this social contract between the white woman and the white man, we never signed up for this. We don't care about chivalry. We don't care about coverture. We want to control our bodies. So, you know, that's when you got Roe v. Wade in 73 and ever since then. So the third wave really started at 1988 with Dr. Carol Pateman's book. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of the black feminists, they had already had major best-selling books way before 1988. And that's what I'm referring to when I talk about Barbara Smith and the Combahee River Collective that she founded, and her being the founder of the term and coining the term identity politics. So I want to shout out Dregamista. Appreciate you sending that support, man. You know, you guys really keep me motivated to, you know, keep digging into these stories that I'm glad to share with you, because unfortunately, like a lot of the older black men from that boomer generation, Barbara Smith was a first wave boomer. She's 73 years old, and we're only talking about her today because she came out of the shadows, because again, they had been getting everything they wanted from the Black Girl Magic feminist movement over the last 40 years. But now they've come out of the shadows because of, guess who? Bernie Sanders. So I'm sitting here and I'm trying to make this connection. I'm like, okay, they were getting all these professorial jobs, getting all these grants, had all these think tanks, and they just decided to just sit back and do the intellectual part of it and get those fat checks. And I'm like, why did they decide to come forward now with Bernie Sanders, endorsing Bernie Sanders? And I'm like, oh, you know, feminists and these misandrists, why would they support specifically Bernie Sanders, even over, like, they have two female candidates left in the Democratic race. You have Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. It looks like Amy Klobuchar won't last another 2 weeks. But Elizabeth Warren won the Nevada debate the other day, and she's most likely to get first or second in Nevada. So she'll be in it. So I'm asking myself, like, why would y'all jump behind Bernie Sanders instead of jumping behind Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, who are both at the top of Emily's List, one of the most well-funded feminist groups in America? So I'm thinking, okay, so they see Bernie Sanders as being the last phase of the completion of a cycle that really started back in the late 60s. And I say that because they said it in their own words. And so people will be like, man, you know, I don't believe that. I don't think those feminists would support Bernie Sanders. They're going to support Elizabeth Warren or Klobuchar. No, they're not. They're getting behind Bernie Sanders because he mostly fits the communist model that they've been pushing for. Now, for my older boomer brothers, they probably know about people like Germaine Greer and these feminists from like that 70s, 80s period who wrote books like The Female Eunuch. And that's a book that I recommend to all of you brothers. I've been looking into it, but I kind of got focused on this Combahee River Collective statement from 1978. But for you brothers that's looking for something to read and really, you know, that don't know about this black feminist movement and white feminist movement from the 60s and 70s, a good place to start is with The Female Eunuch. And the reason I say that that's the book by Germaine Greer is because it shows the relationship between communism, cultural Marxism, and feminism, and how feminism is not the root of it. Communism is. Now, I want to give this quote to you all from The Female Eunuch. And it says that women's liberation, if it abolishes the patriarchal family, will abolish a necessary substructure of the authoritarian state. So let's get on with it. So to her, the patriarchal state, from her position as a feminist, is that it's an authoritarian state and that male-led households are authoritarian. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because, again, a theory is great. A thesis is great, right? But all that matters is results and what solves the problem. And I think that after 60 years, at least from the perspective of the black majority, feminism has not solved any problems for the black family. It's created a whole lot of problems, though. and assisted in creating a lot of destruction. So she also goes on to say, and how do we make cultural revolution? By destroying the American family. How do we destroy the family? By destroying the American patriarch. And how do we destroy the American patriarch? By taking away his power. Whew. Man. Whoa, man. Man. You know, just reading that, reading the words, because again, you know, one of the stereotypes of us black men, they say that we don't read. Hey, brothers, you do realize that they've been saying this forever, that we don't read and we don't think. That's what they say about you black men. It never occurred to them that a younger generation of black men would prove that, yes, actually we do read. And not only do we read, we're actually going to start going back and looking at some of these important canon literature of the gender studies and feminist movement, because we're in election year and time's running out. And there's a lot of black men that are still on the fence. They still believe that the misandrist and the feminist is somehow a black woman that's on your team. No, she's not. Those categories are separate. Those categories are separate, man. The black woman is her own category. The black misandrist is a category that's gender neutral, income neutral, race neutral, and the feminist as well. See, there's male feminists out there, black and white and Latino, whatever. So you have to look at what the goal is. And again, their goal is anti-family based on the communist literature. Is to destroy what they call the American patriarch by destroying the man and taking his power away. That's why Me Too got my attention, because it was the first time that I said, wow, this is serious. These people are really trying to destroy people's careers off allegations and take their wealth based off allegations. And again, you know, we're in the middle of the jury deliberation right now for the Weinstein trial. And as everyone knows, he was the popular figure that really started this Me Too movement that they use as their first target. And his jury deliberation is going on right now. And from what I'm hearing, they're saying that they might get a decision today. So stay tuned for that. I'll post it in the community tab if that comes down. I've always said that I thought that he would be found acquitted or get a hung jury. And I think other people are starting to realize it as well. Because again, I think what it is, these people like to use the black man as their target on some Emmett Till thing, right? Some Emmett Till tip, because those have been the main ones that have been actually prosecuted and convicted have been black men, even though they are a minority in corporate America and in Hollywood, especially in terms of who actually control things. Weinstein, that's the real power, guys like him, Kevin Spacey, Charlie Rose, you know, these are the kind of guys that really had the power. Les Moonves, these guys had the power, but they're not the ones that are getting convicted. So we're going to see how the thing plays out with Weinstein. But to me, it's just more Jim Crowism. But now it's not just the white people that are doing the Jim Crow. It's everybody against the black man, right? So I wanted to share the Combahee River collective statement that Barbara Smith and the Black Girl Magic Feminists and the Black Lesbians wrote back in 1978. But you heard from her own words is that when she coined that term identity politics, it had nothing to do with anyone but black women. And it wasn't just like a cultural thing. It was a political thing. But she actually, when you actually read into her history, she said that they actually started pushing that movement back in 1974. They just issued the statement 4 years later. And then they got the money for the organization from different foundations, you know, to fund their collective agenda and to take over academia. But this was a 4-year process. And once they succeeded, they fell back into the shadows. And then they just started taking control of different social science departments and administrative positions to push the feminist narrative. And we're kind of at the peak of it right now. And we're going to decide, are we going to become a country that, as Aristotle says, one of the warnings in Aristotle's The Republic that stuck out to me is that we know that he wrote that book like 2,500 years ago, right? But one of the contentions that he made is that politics and political systems and economic systems are cyclical, that what you think today is new is actually just a repeat of the past. And I always keep this quote as I try to study this moment that we're in, where there's this attempt to destroy the family. And he said that masculine republics like the United States will eventually give way to feminine democracies, and feminine democracies will eventually give way to tyranny. That's critical, because he said that back 2,500 years ago, man, in his famous book, The Republic. And he laid out what a perfect communist utopia would look like, theoretically. But just think about what he said. Masculine republics give way to feminine democracies, and feminine democracies give way to tyranny. That's what we're experiencing right now. Censorship. People like Bernie Sanders talking about seizing people's property. But you can't have an opinion. If we just want to do a review of the Combahee River collective statement that is public knowledge and part of the gender studies canon, they want to censor you from having those conversations, because you can actually begin the process of, with your brotherhood, with your think tank, of picking apart the arguments made. And now that it's 40 years later, we can see that they succeed and who benefited the most from it. So I'm sitting there thinking about it as I read through Barbara Smith's literature, and you know, they hijacked a term. So you're like, well, what is this Combahee River collective thing, right? That's the name of the organization created in 1970s by these Black girl magic feminists and the Black lesbians, right? And most people don't know that the reason that the Combahee River is famous is because of an incident that happened during the Civil War in June 1863. Very interesting history that's important that we Black men, that we share with each other. So in 1863, the Union Army had invaded South Carolina. And for all you guys that are in the history, you know that South Carolina is where the first shot for the Civil War started in 1861 at Fort Sumter. So now the Union Army has been making its way from the north down into the south. They're taking over plantations. They're burning the resources, and they're freeing enslaved Black Africans in the process. Now, the reason that the Combahee River raid is important is because Harriet Tubman was involved in that raid. Now, this is where the feminists come in. So Harriet Tubman was working at the time as an intelligence officer and spy and nurse for the Union Army in 1863. They had stationed her down in South Carolina to collect information, to give them like a lay of the land, to survey the land or whatnot, so that they can have an idea of like how to go about taking the Confederate forces, how to secure the plantations or whatnot. So she was down there working in South Carolina. And what happened is that the Union generals at that time, they planned a raid on a lot of the plantation areas on the Combahee River at that time. So Harriet Tubman ended up being chosen to help lead the expedition as a surveyor and a scout. Now, for Black men, it's important because the 54th Regiment of Massachusetts is a famous regiment from the Civil War, where many of our great grandfathers fought coming out of Massachusetts. And they were very successful in South Carolina, leading the charges at the front lines. So what happened is that the Union Army had gotten together 750 soldiers from the 54th Regiment, with Tubman acting as a scout. And they went and raided a bunch of these military barracks and plantations along the Combahee River down there in South Carolina. But eventually, a bunch of these enslaved Blacks saw that that the Union had these different ferries and these Union boats coming down there. So they initially had 3 Union boats called the Centennial, the U.S. Harriet Weed, and the USS John Adams. So they had these different war boats, and they're coming down and they're destroying these barracks and the military installations of the South. The Confederate slavers and planters ran away. So they left behind all these enslaved Africans. So what happened is that these enslaved Africans forced the Union Army to take them, because they were just going to leave. But it was so many of these enslaved Africans at that time that they wouldn't let the boats leave. So they ended up getting about 750 to 1,000 of these enslaved Africans off the plantation. They took them to safety, and then ended up coming back later to conquer South Carolina. But the most important part of the story is that the reason that the Combahee River Collective named their organization after that is that they were saying that so they took a story about Black liberation that had no gender issue involved at all. It was about Black people being enslaved, men and women and children, and they hijacked the term to mean liberation from the Black family. That is some irony right there. So the Combahee River Collective, led by Barbara Smith and her cohorts, they hijacked an important historical term to say that they were liberating themselves from black men, the black family, and I guess they claim white patriarchy, but everything that they've done in the last 40 years has actually strengthened white patriarchy, if you ask me. So that's the story of the Combahee River raid. You know, it was actually the Union Army led by black soldiers and Harriet Tubman working as their scout, and they freed up to 1,000 enslaved blacks. So when they took that term, they saw it as partially feminist because Tubman was involved, and then partially as a sign of liberation. So what they're saying is that the feminist is liberating herself from the black family and the quote unquote black patriarch, which I find funny that they call black men patriarchs. So this is where I got to have my boomer people come in. I need y'all to help me out because I'm not hearing enough from the boomers and the older Gen Xers on this, because y'all keep getting blamed for a lot of stuff by these women from the boomer generation, who really are the leaders of what became third and fourth wave feminism. So I need to hear more from the older boomers on this, because they blame black men for everything, these boomer women. Black men are these patriarchs. Black men are abusive. Black men did this. Black men did that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more over the year from the older black men on this, because they have just made so many allegations and claims against black men. And in my opinion, black men have been so egalitarian from what I've read so far. They've been the ones that have been the most likely to share their power, share their access and their resources with the black female, looking at her more as an equal than as a servant. So I don't know where this black patriarchy has been. I know it doesn't exist today. We all know that, as it's been replaced by an open gynocracy. But I'm trying to figure out, when was this year that this black patriarchy exists? Because up until 1865, black men were under the Jim Crow patriarchy, just like the black women were, just like the black boys and the black girls were. So I'm trying to figure out, where was this black male patriarchy? Did it exist between just for like 10 years between 1966 and 1975? I mean, was there like just this 10-year period where black men had this patriarchy and they were just beating the shit out of black women, making them into slaves? Because that's what they make it sound like. Because I know it definitely wasn't before 1965, and it definitely hasn't been since 1985. So there must have been like this period between 1866 and maybe 1966 and 1984 that there was this black patriarchy that I had never heard about. So if there's anyone that's from that generation, man, I'm gonna need to hear more from y'all on this, because, you know, as we read through this statement, the attacks is on your generation of black men, because this was written in over the course of 1974 to 1978. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to that. So you all bear with me, because it's important. I'm gonna stop at certain places because I want to get interaction from the chat. But this is one of the most important documents related to the black family, the gender war, and the conflict between black men and black women that has never been talked about in these spaces. And I've only been on here since 2018, so I don't know. Maybe other black men talked about the Combahee River Collective statement, but I never heard of it. So if there's anyone out there that did this before me, salute to you. But the last 2 years, I've never heard anyone mention this statement. But this statement is on par with the white feminist 1988 declaration in the Sexual Contract by Dr. Carol Pateman. But this was 10 years prior. That's why this hit me so hard, because I've always had a feeling that the black woman's feminism is a wave ahead of the white woman. So if the white woman is in fourth wave right now, and it peaked with me too, then I've always believed that black women were in the fifth wave, which is defined by open misandry, like totally open misandry. Things like being able to say in magazines, black men are trash, or black men are the terrorists of the black community, things like that. That's misandry. And a sense of entitlement just because of your gender, right? So this was written 10 years before the Sexual Contract. So black feminists and black lesbians got together. They got their funding from these organizations, and they created what they call the Combahee River Collective, which you saw in the opening with that woman, Barbara Smith. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading a little bit of this, but I'm going to stop at certain points because I really want to get feedback as I go through these 4 or 5 paragraphs from the audience, because I want to hear what you have to say at each point. So let me go ahead and bring it up, and I'm going to read this because this is one of the most important documents. It has a lot of stuff in here, man, and it might really ring a bell for some of the boomer men out there who had to deal with these women over the last 40, 50 years, man, and didn't have the kind of space that we have to talk about it. So what you're looking at on the screen right here is the Combahee River Collective statement. And the name of this organization was founded by the woman that you saw on the screen, Barbara Smith, who told you straight out, identity politics has nothing to do with anyone but Black women. It's a political agenda, a social and a cultural agenda to help destroy the Black family. So the Combahee River Collective statement: we are a collective of Black feminists who have been meeting together since 1974. During that time, we have been involved in the process of defining and clarifying our politics, while at the same time doing political work within our own group and in coalition with other progressive organizations and movements. Now, here's the mission statement right here. The most general statement of our politics at the present time would be that we are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. Now, that's where we get this first mention of intersectionalism. They called it interlocking at that time. Now they call it intersectionalism. They say the synthesis of these oppressions creates the conditions of our lives as Black feminists. As Black women, we see Black feminism as the logical political movement to combat the manifold and simultaneous oppressions that all women of color face. Now they say, we will discuss 4 major topics in the paper that follows: the genesis of contemporary Black feminism, what we believe, the specific province of our politics, the problems in organizing Black feminists, including a brief her story of our collective, and Black feminist issues in practice. So I'm gonna stop it there for now because I want to read a couple comments, what you guys have to think about that mission statement. Because remember, this is 1978, 10 years before the white feminist sexual contract was shredded. So let me get a couple thoughts on the opening of that. So let's see. So Ryle says, yeah, this takes me back to undergrad and them dumb hoes in class arguing goofy stuff. T. Alexander, I believe the ABW and that specific group that is currently in power have lack of attractiveness as their main motivator. That's interesting that you say that, T. Alexander, because it's funny. When I was reading about Barbara Smith's biography, she actually mentioned thinking that she was ugly all of her life because she grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and she was actually born in like 1946. So she grew up during a time where she said that she didn't feel that her looks was valued, and she held a grudge. She didn't say who, she just said the environment. So that could include white people, Black people, but I always tend to think that they're referring to Black men, especially when they're very vague and don't specify. But she actually said that she thought she was ugly most of her life. So she probably had a grudge against the Black young boomer man sitting up there in his Mustang, you know, back in the 60s or whatever. And he was riding right past her ass, trying to get to Lena Horne or something like that. And these women do have like some serious penis envy and some sexual dysfunction. So T. Alexander makes a great point. There's something going on there, man. Because she said it herself. She said that she found herself to be unattractive because she wasn't getting the attention and the validation that she wanted. So a lot of these women were crying out for attention and money as well. So they said, you know, if I can't get the attention that I need, I can at least get the money, right? And that kind of defined that whole generation of women. Their degree is their man and the state is their man. So the nameless protagonist says that organization openly identifies as being lesbian, much like Black Lives Matter does. Absolutely. But you have to remember the nameless protagonist. A lot of us weren't even born at the time that this was going on. So most of us were born in the 80s and the 90s. So this is new information for a lot of young Black men. The boomers may know about this in the silence, but we didn't know about a lot of this stuff, man. And that's why I'm sharing it with everyone, because I know that it's a lot of brothers that just didn't know about it. And we're going to become masters of Black feminism before the next 6 months is up. I'm not talking about waiting until November. By the time that July rolls around and these different political nominating conventions take place, all the Black men in space will be masters on this shit. I promise you. And we're starting with this Combahee River Collective statement because this is one of the most important documents shredding the social contract between the Black man and the Black female. So we always talk about the gender war, but this is one of the most critical pieces missing of the gender war. This is almost like shredding a treaty. You see what I'm saying? Or doing like an overthrow of a ruling power in the eyes of the feminists, at least. So like, think of it from like how America overthrew the British and they created their own nation under their own contract, right? So this is the feminists saying that we're overthrowing the alleged black patriarchy that I still don't know when it existed or where. And that's why you got movies like The Color Purple and stuff like that, because they really believe this shit, man. Infantry Skrill says, any boomer that doesn't tell you the only way out of this is to politically go to the right of these black feminists is a coward. BGS is one of them. He does not want to do what it takes. Well, I kind of think that's unfair, Infantry Skrill, for you to come into my chat and say that about BGS because he's not here to defend himself. You can make your comment without necessarily tagging him. If that's an issue that you have with him, BGS does panels every day, damn near. Sometimes he does 8-hour panels. Matter of fact, when he showed up on my panel, it ended up being the longest panel ever. So we all know he's available. So you got to go take that up with BGS, bro. But I get what you're saying about boomers in general. But if you have a specific issue with him, you got to take that up with him, man. T. Alexander, I believe the ABW and that specific group that is currently in power have a lack of attractiveness. Okay, yeah. No doubt about that. But I think I read that one. So let me go to another one. So yeah, just want to get a couple more of these comments. So Albert Burr says it started long before the boomers were even born. Yeah. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, Albert. I just think that now it's all out there for you to see now. I think that our ability to go back and share the literature, because so much of this was isolated, right? Like you learned something, but there were only so many places that you could go to share with large audiences. The church, but that was under someone else's control. The classroom, that's controlled by the professor, right? Different events that's controlled by different organizations so they can mute your voice. The television, that was controlled by the media. But now we have our own sites and blogs, and we have these third-party platforms that we can use as well to have the same kind of conversation that we just couldn't have 30 years ago with such, like I can read things to you that I'm reading in an interactive way and get you guys' feedback in real time. This is an incredible moment that we're living in. It's that simple. Wow. Nameless Protagonist says, wow, so this may be right why they pushed that movie and now this bank car Wakanda mess. Yeah, absolutely, that's why they did it. They're trying to seize Harriet Tubman as being an anti-black male, as if she was a black misandry, and she wasn't. But that's how they're playing it. Turbato says, blaming black men is like a grab bag for cash and prize for the ABWs. Oh, man, the open misandry is out of control in 2020, but like I said, it's good that, you know, brothers are pushing back hard now, man. I mean, a lot of you guys didn't even know who Barbara Smith was. I know I didn't. I didn't know what the Combahee River Collective was. I knew nothing about this. And now 200 people will know over the next 30 minutes what they were. So I'll just read this last comment and get back to the statement. Rael says, the ABW collectively always wanted to find a way back under masses protection. Feminism disguised as women empowerment was really a dishonest way of going back to the proverbial plantation. Absolutely. You were just basically, Rael, my theory is that they just swapped out the private white patriarch for the public patriarch in the form of government. That's what I think actually is going on. And when you actually read Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch, it all makes sense. I mean, these are women that deeply, deeply have psychological issues of hatred towards men, bro. Like deep issues. And they have had like a brain control over the last 3 generations of women in America, and specifically black women. Because again, the reason that these misandrists disappeared was because they had got nice 6-figure jobs in academia and at think tanks. There was no need to go public. They had to wait for the right moment when it was ripe. And there hasn't been a riper moment to destroy the black family for sure than 2020. And that's why they're backing Bernie Sanders, because he's a communist. He's even said it himself that he did his honeymoon in Russia. This dude is deeply, deeply a communist, man. Shout out to the brother Rollo. Thanks for joining us, man. Y'all go holler at Rollo. Anything related to the travel and the passport, bro, life, that's your guy. Omega Dress says they hate their fathers and loathe thy mothers. Man, seriously, dude. It's deep with them. It's very deep. So let's go back to the statement, because we're going to work through this in an interactive way. So let's go back to, okay. So the first plank on the Combahee River Collective platform. You know, it's funny. I've heard so many people talking about the Save Yourselves Black Men movement and philosophy, and everyone's been going through their tenets. But in the 2 years I've been here, I haven't seen anyone go through the tenets of these Black girl magic feminists and all the history of literature that they have. But I guess that's a conversation for a different day, but something for you guys to think about. So number one plank, the genesis of contemporary Black feminism. Before looking at the recent development of Black feminism, we would like to affirm that we find our origins in the historical reality of African American women's continuous life and death struggle for survival and liberations. Black women's extremely negative relationship to the American political system, a system of white male rule, has always been determined by our membership in two oppressed racial and sexual castes. As Angela Davis points out in Reflections on the Black Woman's Role in the Community of Slaves. So for you people that's trying to look for resources, they mention Angela Davis's Reflections on the Black Woman's Role in the Community of Slaves. Now, the audience on my live stream, I told y'all last time, I actually got my copy of Daughters of the Trade. Yes, that Daughters of the Trade book by Felipe Epson. And I'm going to start reading that next week. But I think this is one that you guys should all add to your list. Reflections on the Black woman's role in the community of slaves. But it says, Black women have always embodied, if only in their physical manifestation, an adversary stance to white male rule. Now, that is interesting. She says that they've always had an adversary stance to white male rule. But everything that I've read so far about feminism and everything that I've read just in the intro of Daughters of the Trade disputes that 100%. Matter of fact, for any of you guys that have this book, Daughters of the Trade, am I lying when I say, let me find the page real quick, but there is a disturbing water painting, a watercolor painting from the year 1843 out there in Africa of this these white guys at this table. This was a real event. So I'll just read what it says in the watercolor. The Prince of Joinville painted this watercolor of his lunch with Governor Edward Carstensen and his men at Christiansburg in January 1843. His accompanying text does not identify the Black women in the painting. So there was this luncheon of these rich white men in West Africa back in 1843. So these were slave traders and businessmen, and they had like these clubs where they had Black women walking around, like it was like a strip club. They walked around butt naked, topless, sometimes fully nude, and they served these different white men. And it was like they had guards in it. And he actually did like a painting of what he participated in. And he got like all these very healthy, thick Black women in the painting. So I'm gonna just leave that thought with you. So that's in the Daughters of the Trade, one of the paintings that they have that was actually painted by one of the white men that was at this luncheon. They had private strip clubs and brothels back then, even in 1843. So I reject what she just said. So it says, and have actively resisted its inroads upon them and their communities in both dramatic and subtle ways. There have always been Black women activists, some known like Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frances E.W. Harper, Ida B. Wells, and Mary Church Terrell, and thousands upon thousands unknown who have had a shared awareness of how their sexual identity combined with their racial identity to make their whole life situation and the focus of their political struggles unique. Contemporary Black feminism is the outgrowth of countless generations of personal sacrifice, militancy, and work by our mothers and sisters. So I want to see, okay, so I'm going to stop at the end of this one so I can check the chat, get y'all comments on this first plank. So it says, a Black feminist presence has evolved most obviously in connection with the second wave of the American women's movement beginning in the late 1960s. Told you. Black, other third world, and working women have been involved in the feminist movement from its start, but both outside reactionary forces and racism and elitism within the movement itself have served to obscure our participation. In 1973, Black feminists, primarily located in New York. Now you guys know why New York is the communist hellhole that it is. These feminists and these communists have been at this for like 40, 50 years, man. And it says, we felt the necessity of forming a separate Black feminist group. This became the National Black feminist organizations. So there you go, fellas. In 1973, the Black feminists of the Combahee River Collective created an organization called the National Black Feminist Organization, a political movement to separate themselves and fight for their issues over the next 50 years. It says, Black feminist politics also have an obvious connection to movements for Black liberation, particularly those of the 1960s and 1970s. Many of us were active in these movements, the civil rights, Black nationalism, the Black Panthers, and all of our lives were greatly affected and changed by their ideologies, their goals, and the tactics used to achieve their goals. It was our experience and disillusionment with these liberation movements, as well as experience on the periphery of the white male left, that led to the need to develop a politics that was anti-racist, unlike those of white women. Now, this is where they make the distinction between themselves and white women. So they claim in here in 1978 that the white women were racist and anti-sexist, unlike those of Black and white men. So here it is, people. They're calling you in 1978, they're saying that the Black man was sexist and that the white man was sexist. So the white woman is against her, the Black man is against her, and the white man is against her. I wonder what they think about the Asians, but apparently all they worried about is the Black and the white. So this Black girl Magic in 1978 set up this scenario where she is the victim of the Black man, the white man, and the white woman. So this is where we're at in 1978. There's also undeniably a personal genesis for Black feminism. That is the political realization that comes from the seemingly personal experience of individual Black women. Black feminists and many more Black women who do not define themselves as feminists have all experienced sexual oppression as a constant factor in our day-to-day existence. So the Black man and the white woman is sexually oppressing the innocent victim Black woman. She would never voluntarily objectify herself. 50 years has not taught us that she would voluntarily objectify herself. As the get the bag prostitutes would really listen to this, they laugh. And the get the bag prostitutes, when they hear that line, they're laughing because their whole ethics and tenets is that whatever it takes to get the bag, it's not objectification. So keep that in mind as we go through this. As children, we realized that we were different from boys and that we were treated differently. For example, we were told in the same breath to be quiet, both for the sake of being ladylike and to make us less objectionable in the eyes of white people. As we grew older, we became aware of the threat of physical and sexual abuse by men. However, we had no way of conceptualizing what was so apparent to us, what we knew was really happening. Black feminists often talk about their feelings of craziness before becoming conscious of the concepts of sexual politics, patriarchal rule, and most importantly, feminism. The political analysis and practice that we women use to struggle against our oppression. The fact that racial politics and indeed racism are pervasive factors in our lives did not allow us and still does not allow most Black women to look more deeply into our own experiences. And from that sharing and growing consciousness to build a politics that will change our lives and inevitably end our oppression. Our development must also be tied to the contemporary economic and political position of Black people. The post-World War II generation of Black youth was the first to be able to minimally partake of certain educational and employment options previously closed completely to Black people. Although our economic position is still at the very bottom of the American capitalistic economy, a handful of us have been able to gain tools as a result. Now, this is powerful, this last sentence in this paragraph. A handful of us have been able to gain certain tools as a result of tokenism. She's referring to affirmative action in its first manifestation. Well, actually, this would have been the second round of it. This is when it turned from Black male affirmative action in the late 60s, early 70s to being overthrown and overtaken by the feminists in the late 70s and since. So she says, as a result of tokenism in education and employment, which potentially enable us to more effectively fight our oppression. A combined anti-racist and anti-sexist position drew us together initially. And as we developed politically, we addressed ourselves to the heterosexism and economic oppression under capitalism. So for you, I'm gonna stop there on the first plank and go back to the chat and see what you guys have to say about that. But that's interesting. So they declared war on what they called heterosexual oppression then. So that's why you have all these Black folks in Hollywood sacrificing their children to the communists and getting behind people like Bernie Sanders, because that's what they want to do. They're here to destroy the family. Simple as that. And the black family is like their guinea pig and test organization and structure. Because again, to destroy the economy and the political situation, you have to start with the family, because the basic unit of politics and economics is the family household. So however the majority of households are structured, whether they be male-led, whether they be female-led, whether they be co-parenting, traditional, that's going to become the eventual structure of your economy and politics. And these feminists at that time understood this fully. So let me go back to the chat. Okay, so let's see what you guys have to say about that plank number 1. So let's see. I just want to shout out the brother T. Alexander. Yo, Sigma, one thing I found interesting is ABW birthing habits and their adherence to feminist policy of having kids late, IVF use, etc. thoughts. Then they complain about healthcare for black women. Well, yeah, absolutely. That's just part of the bait and switch that they've been playing. They play this victim role, but they're sitting in a glass house throwing all these bricks against the same people that they're claiming that they've been a victim since, I guess, slavery. But everything that I read proves that many of these women were collaborators with the same white patriarchy that they complain about. And definitely in the last 30 years, they've been open collaborators with white feminists. And now the white feminist is kicking her off the table, and their last hope is Bernie Sanders. Because again, him being a communist, he's against private property, freedom of speech, and he's for mediocrity. He's not for excellence. So that's why they're pushing the transgender agenda so heavily right now, which I actually believe is a form of genital mutilation and over-sexualization of children. And that's what I believe that's about. But really the goal is really, it's another form of misandry, because the ones that they're putting out there the most are black boys. And you don't see Larry Bird's son coming out there talking about he's a girl. You don't see some of these famous white male actors coming out saying that their son, Clint Eastwood, you don't see Clint Eastwood's son talking about he wants to wear a dress. It's just very strange that all these A-lister black men, they're the ones that are sacrificing their boys to these communists. When you really think about it, you don't see Clint Eastwood's son out there. You don't see Larry Bird's son out there, an NBA Hall of Famer. You don't see one of these Garth Brooks' son out there. It's always someone that's black son being presented and leading the pride parade, always as the mascot. You see what I'm saying? That's how they play this game. And this is the root of it right here, the 70s. And the reason that none of us knew about it, because most of us were born in the 80s or the 90s, and no one told us this information. It hasn't been passed down correctly. We've lost so much of our oral history as Native Black Americans. There used to be an oral history that these stories were passed down and we stayed on code. That's why the code was broken, because the stories stopped getting told and they put forward all of these feminists and lesbians to speak for Black America. So when you ask yourself, where has all this money been going? It's been going to the Black church, and it's been going to these anti-Black male organizations over the last 4 decades or whatnot. Who knows how much money these feminist organizations have collected? Because I know the Black church in the time period that we're talking about, they've collected over 430 billion. And I can't wait to my March 1st panel that I'm holding on the splintering of Black America. It's going to be dope, man. We're going to go in, because we're going to have to talk more about that Black church and the funds that it secured for itself and what that money could have done for your Black majority. So the brother Gear Znet says, I wonder how much these pregnancy habits have to do with their complications with childbirth. Having a kid late, hella abortions, high body count. I mean, they're the guinea pigs, bro. It's almost like a Tuskegee experiment when you think about it. When you go back to the Tuskegee experiment, Blacks have always been used for certain kind of experiments. There's social experiments, then there's even physical ones. And what makes it so interesting that you're talking about a social and a physical experiment that's been done on Black women specifically. And they actually have been believing that this was to their benefit. But when you look it up, I don't see many benefits that have accrued to the rank and file Black woman, and especially not the Black male or the black child. Now that we can actually go back and consider how far have we come since 1978 and the Combahee River Collective Statement. So Roddy Benoit says, what up, King? I read an article that explained if men go on strike for a week, it will take 3 years for the economy and other activities to recover. Men need to walk away and boycott. Well, I think that's already happening, Rowdy, because you see it with Hollywood. They just had the Star Wars movie flop, and then they just had that Birds of Prey movie flop. So Hollywood is already catching him. Corporate America on Wall Street stopped it. They said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do the Mike Pence rule. We're not going to let all this talent walk out the door because of misandry. Hollywood, being the propaganda arm of misandry, they are the ones that are going to be the last one to wave the white flag. And that white flag is coming. That's why they're putting so much of their hopes on this election, because they know that many men are leaving. And a lot of black men are saying, I'm not going to vote at all. I'm going to protest vote. Some are saying I'm going to go third party, and others are saying that they're going with the GOP. So they know that this is their last chance, because if they lose this battle, it's going to be a repelling of pretty much all of their policies for the next decade. So that's what I think that's about. But that's just my opinion. Rael says, you have an LGBT presidential candidate telling Christians to not vote for Trump. In Obsidian's voice, are you kidding me? Yeah. I mean, they've totally they've destroyed what the biblical teachings are, especially when you go back to like the Old Testament, and they've turned the Bible into whatever they want. So that's what it tells you, is that there's two levels to being a religious person. There's you in your private study, mastering the scriptures yourself that no one can take from you. And then there's a medium telling you what it means without you having mastery, and then using it as a form of social control over you. And the way that he's using it is a form of social control. Don't believe what you saw or read. Listen to me, because I'm an authority figure. That's all that is. But the problem that they're running into is that black men like myself and those that are in this chat today are having these conversations deeply on a very intellectual level. You can't censor that. See, that's the problem that they're running into. What do you do when black men themselves start to dig through the platforms, start to dig through the text that created the platforms, and start to reject what doesn't fit with their outlook, that doesn't fit with their value system, and doesn't promote their own rational self-interest? I just don't think that they saw this moment coming with black men. That's why they're trying to put Stacey Abrams out there, which is, she's like an avatar for this kind of black feminism, independent woman, I don't need a man, diabetes lifestyle, high debt level. But black men aren't jumping on that. And there's a lot of black women waking up to the reality too, because again, we're talking about the top 20% of black women who are getting benefits from these kind of movement, but the other 80% of black women are living in hell right now, man. They're stuck in generational poverty right now. They have the highest rate of instant death of their child, prenatal underfunding, because all this money that should be going to lifting up our poorest is going to the people that need it the least, to just enrich them more. So they already got six-figure salaries, but they're taking from the poor. So instead of just making $100,000 through their think tank, now they can buy that $5 million house out there in Prince George County or in DeKalb County or something like that, right? So that money should be going to the poor, but instead it's going to those that claim to speak and administer for the poor. And only like 20% of that money ever gets to the poor, but most of it gets caught up in administrative costs. But we're going to get into that later in the year, man. But I've been digging into this stuff. Black Americans, you have been bamboozled, and no one has been more bamboozled than the American black woman. These elite black women do not care about you at all. All they've been doing is trying to get a bigger home, a new series of a BMW, and travel the world drinking tea with their sisterhood, while all of y'all sitting there in deep poverty with multiple kids by the most degenerate individuals with no hope of getting out. And y'all are gonna have to stand up, man, and say, if y'all accept that these women speak for you, then you deserve everything you get. But I don't think that these women speak for the rank and file black woman. The more I read into this stuff, I don't even think the rank and file black woman really knows how deep this thing goes. But she's gonna have to stand up and speak for herself, or they're gonna just see y'all lost for history, because they don't care if y'all ever get out of poverty going forward in the next generation. They're trying to erase y'all from the conversation. All they want is your votes. And all they want to do is do speeches and have a couple of black women standing in the background holding up signs saying that Bernie, black women for Bernie or something like that. And the moment this election is over, they're going to toss y'all back in the trash can. But this time it's not going to be just for 4 years. This time it may be for the rest of Americans' history over the next 100 years. So Khalil Amir L says, Joe Jackson had Hollywood execs touching Michael for fame and fortune. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. That's interesting, man. You have to send me the evidence of that. Not 100% sure about that, Khalil. Keith Wisdom says, they said, I don't need a man, just my father and want to finance my life. Yeah, that is the double, the two-ness of their conversation and the hypocrisy of it all. They contradict themselves every time, man. They don't need a man, but they need they claim they didn't have a father in their life. All day long they cry about that. And then they also looking for the bag. So obviously they do need a man. Turbattle says, yeah, that's a big part of it. It was funded by Marxists anyway. Absolutely. Rael says, I said 10 years ago, they miscalculated with black men, assuming black men would never walk away. It doesn't take for all black men to walk away. A small percentage can upset the order. Yeah, there's always a tipping point, right? So we know that it wasn't the tipping point that it was in 2010, which was around 15% of black men marrying out and probably around 25% that were dating out. Now we have the new census coming out in 2020. And my prediction is that it'll show like 25% of black men marrying out and probably like around 30 to 35% dating out. And to me, I think that's the tipping point. And that's why I think 2020 is so critical. Because I think what's happened is that we reached the tipping point. We just don't have the 2020 data yet. And that's not going to be available until December of this year. But we're going through all of that, man. So you don't have to worry about that, right? We're going to go through that, the whole entire U.S. Census, economics, the demographics, everything when that comes out. So I'll be on that one fast. But that's my prediction what the numbers will show. So I'll give like one more comment before I go back to the second plank of the Combahee River Collective Statement and the Black Woman's Declaration of Independence from the Black Patriarch, allegedly. So all right, let me get back to this article. I'm gonna bring it back up on the screen for everyone because I want to kind of just work through it in an interactive way. So let's see. So here's the second plank. What we believe as Black feminists and Black lesbians. Now remember, this is 1978, everyone. Above all else, our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that Black women are inherently valuable, that our liberation, there's that word again, our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to somebody else's made because of our need as human persons for autonomy. Now that's that she used the word liberation again, and somebody else's. That's the critical topic sentence right there that starts the second plank. This may seem so obvious as to sound simplistic, but it is apparent that no other ostensibly progressive movement has ever considered our specific oppression. There's oppression again. Liberation, oppression, somebody else's standard, as a priority or work seriously for the ending of that oppression. Merely naming the pejorative stereotypes attributed to Black women, mammy, matriarch, sapphire, whore, bulldagger. Now that's interesting that she was saying this in 1978, and actually they have slut walks going on right now. You have the Suzanne Rice, Oprah Winfrey, Gayle King scandal with Snoop Dogg going on right now. And you have the embracing of the sapphire stereotype all over music right now in Hollywood. So look at where we're at in 2020 versus 1978. So she says, let alone cataloging the cruel, often murderous treatment we receive, indicates how little value has been placed upon our lives during 4 centuries of bondage in the Western Hemisphere. False. There was always 8 times more Black men killed, molested, incarcerated, and brutalized than Black women. Black women didn't even get maybe 20% of the cruelty that was done to Black men. We realize that the only people who care enough about us to work consistently for our liberation are us. There it is, brothers. There it is. We realize that the only people who care enough about us to work consistently for our liberation are us. But when a Black man says the only people who cares enough about the Black man to free him from his intellectual and physical bondage is the Black male, everyone gets triggered and he becomes the problem. But when a Black woman has been saying this since the 70s, no one has anything to say about it. No one's going through their list but me. So it says our politics evolved from a healthy love for ourselves, our sisters, and our community which allows us to continue our struggle and work. But if you just replace sisters with brothers, then all of a sudden everyone is out there filing articles against the black man. Everyone is trying to bring down black men conspirators. Everyone is trying to call in the white daddy on the black man when he starts thinking for himself. This thing is funny as hell to me, man. It says, this focusing upon our own oppression is embodied in the concept of identity politics. Now, there it is. The concept of identity politics. Now, there's a direct connection between the black woman's oppression and identity politics from the very beginning. We believe that the most profound and potentially most radical politics come directly out of our own identity as black women, as opposed to working to end somebody else's oppression. Now, who is somebody else's oppression? The black male, because that's who she's in direct proximity to, is the black male and the black child. So she's saying that we're not trying to work for somebody else's oppression, the black male, because they know white men been oppressed. I know that much. And the white woman's oppression is the least oppressed of all of us. So her oppression still ain't nothing compared to the black male's oppression. The most oppressed figure and person in this world is the black American, native black American male. But she declared that we're not here to work for y'all oppression. Cool. In the case of black women, this is particularly repugnant, dangerous, threatening, and therefore revolutionary concept, because it is obvious from looking at all the political movements that have preceded us that anyone is more worthy of liberation than ourselves. We reject pedestals, queenhood. Oh, the plantation bro is not going to like that. She said, we reject pedestals, queenhood, and walking 10 paces behind to be recognized as human, levelly human as enough. That one is going to trigger a lot of gynocracy drones because they thought that she wanted that title of queen. Well, she just rejected it, brother. So you go ahead and keep pushing and simping. Let me see how much more longer this is. All right, so we're almost through the second one. So she says, we believe that sexual politics under patriarchy are pervasive in black women's lives, as are the politics of class and race. We also often find it difficult to separate race from class, from sex oppression, because in our lives, they are most often experienced simultaneously. We know that there is no such thing as racial sexual oppression, which is neither solely racial nor solely sexual. The history of rape of black women by white men as a weapon of political repression. Now, Swirl Mountain concubines would have something to say about that, because what we've learned from the Swirl Mountain concubines, the Jason Roger Popes, the Joe Morris, is that for every woman that was raped, there were a whole lot of women that were in voluntary relationships with the so-called white patriarchy. But another time, another day. Now, she says, although we are feminists and lesbians, we feel solidarity with progressive black men. Now, that's interesting. She says progressive black men. Basically, in the eyes of these misandrists, the progressive black man is the inferior, dominated, emasculated black man. That's what they mean when they say progressive. So when they look at Bernie Sanders, they see an emasculated Jewish white man. And that's why they call him a progressive. That's why they call Barack Obama a progressive, because they consider him to be emasculated and being subordinate to them. So she says, and do not advocate the fractionalization that white women who are separatists demand. So they call the white woman separatist. Now you're starting to see why the white woman is slowly but surely discarding her from the conversation, because again, they've always had their own animosity and they kind of used each other as frenemies. But now the white woman has found the replacement for the black girl magic feminist in the Latina and the Asian woman. So they're trying to groom and develop the Latina and the Asian woman and the biracial woman. They don't want the black woman around no more. And it's because of this deep divide that they always had. So they've been using each other for 40 years. Our situation as black people necessitates that we have solidarity around the fact of race, which white women, of course, do not need to have with white men, unless it is their negative solidarity as racial oppressors. We struggle together with black men against racism, while we also struggle with black men about sexism. We realize that the liberation of all oppressed people necessitates the destruction of the political, economic systems of capitalism and imperialism, as well as patriarchy. We are socialists. Boom! There it is, brothers. There it is. They declared themselves socialists in 1978. There it is in plank 2. We are socialists because we believe that work must be organized for the collective benefit of those who do the work and create the products, and not for the profit of the bosses. Material resources must be equally distributed among those who create these resources. Straight, that's communism, bro. They declared themselves socialists in 1978. That's why they're on team with Bernie Sanders, because they've been communists the whole time. We are not convinced, however, that a socialist revolution that is not also a feminist and anti-racist revolution will guarantee our liberation. Now, brothers, what does Bernie Sanders call his political campaign? The revolution. Now you know why these feminists that had disappeared for 40 years into the shadows are coming out in support of Bernie Sanders. He represents their feminist revolution that they've been fighting for 50 years. We have arrived at the necessity for developing an understanding of class relationships that takes into account the specific class position of Black women, who are generally marginal in the labor force. Now, we know that's a lie. There's actually more Black women working in the labor force today than white women and Black men. So that proved to be wrong. While at this particular time, some of us are temporarily viewed as double desirable tokens at white collar and professional levels. And she complains about being a token, but they haven't had no problem being tokens for the last 40, 50 years, collecting those six-figure salaries and living in those $1 million homes. No complaints about that. We need to articulate the real class situation of persons who are not merely raceless, sexless workers, but for whom racial and sexual oppression are significant determinants in their working economic lives. Although we are in essential agreement with Karl Marx's theory as it applied to the very specific economic relationships he analyzed, we know that his analysis must be extended further in order for us to understand our specific economic situation as Black women. Wow, there it is, boy. You guys thought I was making it up. They're with Bernie Sanders because he's a communist, and communism has always been about destroying the Black family and the American family through castrating men in Western society. It's right there. So I'm going to read these last two paragraphs and go back to the comment section to get you guys' take on 10 and 2. A political contribution which we feel we have already made is the expansion of the feminist principle that the personal is political. In our consciousness raising sessions, for example, we have in many ways gone beyond white women's revelations because we are dealing with the implications of race and class as well as sex. Boom. Remember what I told y'all. The Black woman's feminist is in she's further ahead in her feminist progress than the white female. That's why only 45% of white women voted against Donald Trump. And that's why 55 voted for Donald Trump, because the white woman is mostly in third wave feminism as of 2016. We'll see what happens in 2020, but I actually suspect that the white woman is actually going to vote even more for white male patriarchy in 2020. So we'll see. But that's why she said that. They actually see themselves as being ahead of the white woman as feminists and actually being the true feminist, which I actually believe that they're right about that. They are the poster child for misandry. Even our Black women's style of talking, testifying in Black language about what we have experienced has a resonance that is both cultural and political. We have spent a great deal of energy delving into the cultural and experiential nature of our oppression out of necessity, because none of these matters has ever been looked at before. No one before has ever examined the multi-layered texture of Black women's lives. An example of this kind of revelation, conceptualization, occurred at a meeting as we discussed the ways in which our early intellectual interests have been attacked by our peers, particularly Black males. We discovered that all of us, because we were smart. Here it is, bro. Khalil's gonna like this one. She said, the Black girl magic feminist say, we discovered that all of us, because we were smart, had also been considered ugly, i.e. smart, ugly, crystallized the way in which most of us had been forced to develop our intellects at great cost to our social lives. The sanctions in the Black and white communities against Black women thinkers is comparatively much higher than for white women, particularly those from the educated middle and upper class. Oh, shit. I told you, boomer brothers. They blame you guys for everything. They said that you guys said that they were ugly because they're smart. It wasn't because they were phenotype ugly or they just happened to be unattractive. They're saying that the reason that the boomer man and the silent man hated them was because they were smart. So I'm gonna need the boomers to step up on this one, man. So finally, they say, as we have already stated, we reject the stance of lesbian separatism because it is not a viable political analysis or strategy for us. It leaves out far too much and far too many people, particularly Black men, women, and children. We have a great deal of criticism and loathing. Now, she used the word loathing. for what men have been socialized to be in this society. So they hate masculinity. That's what it means to loathe something. They hate masculine men. Hate them. Literally. This is in their mission statement. What they support, how they act, and how they oppress. But we do not have the misguided notion that it is their maleness per se, i.e. their biological maleness, that makes them what they are. As Black women, we find any type of biological determinism a particularly dangerous and reactionary basis upon which to build a politic. We must also question whether lesbian separatism is an adequate and progressive political analysis and strategy, even for those who practice it, since it so completely denies any but the sexual source of women's oppression, negating the facts of class and race. So that's the end of 2. I'm gonna go back to the chat, see what you guys have to say about that. But I know my initial thoughts on that was that, did you all see how they blamed boomer men? They said that the reason that the boomer men were treating them like that because they were smart. So they said that they called them ugly because they were smart. And I've never heard any boomer men say, in fact, boomer men have been the most race conscious in this space and having the hardest time dealing with Black men saying that they're going their own way. But right there, they was throwing the boomer man under the bus completely. So Scott Hayward says, good work, Cass. Appreciate you, Scott, man. Thanks for supporting the conversation. Zero Max says, much respect for this platform and topics you covered. You are one of the young, smart brothers taking things to the next level. Hey, man, I'm still learning just like you, bro, but I do appreciate that you recognizing that it's a constructive conversation. So back to what I was saying. So yeah, the boomers got really thrown under the bus, man. I just got to go back and read that line for the older brothers out there, what they said about y'all. We discovered that all of us, because we were smart and had also been considered ugly, i.e. smart ugly. Smart ugly crystallized the way in which most of us have been forced to develop our intellects at great cost to our social lives. Wow. So she's claiming that you boomer men, because they were smart, that you called them ugly. Okay? And when you hear the young Black men in this space say, save yourselves, Black men, why the resistance? When the Black man says, I'm going to create my own political agenda. I'm going to create my own economy. And if necessary, I'll create my own Black towns. And if necessary, I'll expatriate. What exactly are you boomer men defending exactly? You lost the war, man. I'm sorry to tell the boomer man, you lost the war. These women have beaten you. They have more political power than you do. They've accumulated more money from the government, from your tax dollars, than you have. They've destroyed the once strong Black family. So in that way, the Combahee River Collective feminists and lesbians, they won. They did. They won a battle, but they didn't win the war. We're the new plank in the new theater of the new war now. The Black man embracing free movement and freedom of choice. And that's why you see the women like Barbara Smith and her sisterhood coming forward to join Bernie Sanders, because this is their one last chance to win the battle. But they have really, really politically tried to castrate the boomer man. She said y'all called them smart ugly. I never even heard that term. I guess, yeah, the brother's right when he says that we call them femcells. So I guess what we call femcells in this space is what the boomer man referred to as smart ugly. But something tells me that the boomer men didn't say that. I don't think that those brothers back then were saying that, actually, because you had women like Pam Grier, you had Dorothy Dandridge, you had the sister from Good Times. I saw Black men really loving Black beauty at that time. So these women are trying to say that these Black men called them ugly because they were smart. No, they probably called you ugly because you just weren't very attractive. These same women have no problem calling Black men ugly, talking about how they're out of shape, how they're fat, how they're dumb, how they're broke. But for some reason, a boomer man said that Thelma from Good Times was the standard of Afrocentric beauty. Now you mad at him because of that. So I'm going to have to hear more from the boomers on this, bro, because they went at y'all hard. So let me get a couple of the comments before I go back to the third plank, because there are 4 planks and I want to get through this before I got to get out of here. But let's see what y'all got to. Wow, man, this is incredible. But every brother that calls himself a free-thinking Black man, you should have this statement saved to your records, man, because we're going to be going through the feminist literature over the course of this very, very important political year for the next few months. And I want y'all to be tight on y'all game. When they come having a conversation, you show them the receipts. Forget all this, my feelings or what I think. Bring the receipts in their voice. and then reject it in your voice. That's what they have a hard problem with. SKC says, you know this is going to be in my season 2 satirical videos, right, Cass? Salute to you and keep digging. There's so much more. You're going to love it. Hey, man, SKC is setting a new standard, bro, with that video editing that he's doing. He's taking it to a level that I can't even touch until I actually sit down and learn some video editing. But that brother with the little mini movies that he be making to like speak the language as a creative, man, y'all got to go watch some of his videos, bro. He's just getting started, but he really condenses our commentary and these narratives into like such great video footage. So y'all support that brother SKC and what he's doing over there, man. So Larry45 says there is no such thing as a femcel. I disagree. I definitely disagree. I think the women that were complaining about being smart ugly are the definition of what a femcel is. Because for the female, femcel would mean that, because you got to think if incel means involuntarily celibate, the disclaimer would have to say that because you don't want to take what's on the market. You see what I'm saying? So when we talk about the femcel, we're really talking about a woman who she's not satisfied with the men that she can get is what we mean by femcel, right? So there's plenty of men that are even chasing after the women. Because I heard Elizabeth Warren in the Nevada debate say that Bloomberg called women fat, sloppy, horse-faced lesbians. That was on the debate stage the other day. That's what Elizabeth Warren accused Bloomberg of calling women at his job, fat, sloppy, horse-faced lesbians. So even those women that she mentioned can find men because men are typically willing to date down. That's why you'll often see like disabled women, women with mental disorders and things like that with regular looking dudes because of that. So that's what when you say femcel, you're actually talking about they're involuntarily celibate because they don't want to choose. They feel like they deserve a better man and they're not willing to take what's available. So really the correct word probably would be vocel. So we say femcel because they're voluntarily removing themselves from the sexual marketplace because they can't get the man that they think they deserve. Like she said, because they're smart and they're educated, quote unquote. So Ryle says, it makes sense when many of them were raised on welfare, complete indoctrination from birth to 18. Absolutely. They've been indoctrinated, man, by women that they thought were on their side. Incels can get laid via prostitution. So the argument changed to intimacy under the intimacy argument. Femcels can and do exist. I don't agree with that incel argument because prostitution is not legal in 49 states. It's only legal in one state. So until it's legal, you can't, the prostitution thing doesn't work because you can actually go to jail for prostitution outside of Vegas and Nevada. So that doesn't hold up right now. That day is coming, but it's not here yet. Because if prostitution was legal, then I would agree with you. But it's not illegal yet. But it's coming. That day is coming. Rowdy says, Obsidian is right. An incoming spinster bubble is coming. And major recession and automation implementation. In addition, the G20 are nearly bankrupt and Black women are buried under student loan debts. Yeah, that's another reason why they're supporting Bernie. Bernie wants to forgive student loans. And the majority of student debt holders are women. Specifically, Black women have a high concentration of student loan debt. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why they want to vote for Bernie too. Bernie is like their perfect candidate if you think about it. He's giving them everything that they want. They have the most debt. They have the most desire to destroy the Black family. They're going to get everything they want from Bernie Sanders. So Going Postal says, great info. Thanks, bro. Hey, I appreciate you, Going Postal, for stopping through and helping me, work through this this Combahee River collective statement because it's something that none of our generation knew about for the most part. I'm sure that there's some of the very like PhD level brothers that knew about it, but honestly, I'm not a PhD level guy. I didn't know about it. So it's interesting reading to me. Dr. Phoenix says, masterful analysis, brother. Hey, appreciate you, Dr. Phoenix. Hope things are going great at medical school. So for you guys that don't know, the brother Dr. Phoenix, he's currently one of the few Black men in America in medical school right now. And he comes to these red pill spaces and these critical thinking spaces. And I think that it's going to help him out. And it's good to have guys like that know our perspective because the next stage for us is going to be our battle with the academics that are paid by the billion-dollar corporate America because they're coming. Our narrative is way too dangerous. So it's good to have people like Dr. Phoenix hearing the academic side and then hearing our Chitlin Circuit barbershop side of the conversation. The brother Edward Bailey says, what's up? Black American women have dissonant matriarchal disorder and dissociative hypergamy disorder. I mean, I'm sure that the literature is going to start developing for that particular condition that you said that they have. I guess that's what we're laying the foundation of, if it is actually a condition. Turbato says, Elizabeth Warren just kamikaze the DNC money source. Yeah, man, she gave Bloomberg that work, but she had to, because she was about to have to drop out if she didn't give Bloomberg that work. So he was like the perfect target and punching bag for her narrative. So she actually saved her campaign by going after Bloomberg in the way she did. She may have destroyed his whole campaign, kind of the way that Tulsi Gabbard did Kamala Harris back last summer or whatever. So Sheila E says, thank you for the information. Love, feel like I was in a history class. Good stuff. Appreciate it, you dropping in, Sheila, and listening to what the brothers have to say on this topic. It's important that women hear the black man's perspective, because the black female has had a monopoly on public discourse in relation to the state of Black America and the state of the black family. So now it's our turn. So the nameless protagonist says femcel equals lack of validation, incel men lack of sex. We'll have to revisit those terms, man, because the lack of sex is not really that, because these dudes, some of them can actually get laid if they were to actually lower their standards to the lowest level. So it's not a lack of sex, it's a lack of accepting the choices that's on the market. So we'll have to revisit that on a red pill kind of conversation with some of the red pill war room brothers that are more experts on that topic, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, I believe. So AJC and Rhea, salute to you, brother. He says, I'm seeing a lot of Gen Xers still simping for these ABWs funk box. Yeah. That's been their little, the Maggle treats is what they call it. The Maggle treats. The wacky world, he says the solution is simply leave these hoes alone. I mean, yeah. That's the message that we're trying to get out there, is that choose wisely, man. Make sure your vetting game is hella strong. If your vetting game is not strong, then you need to fall back, man, into like some monk mode, because it's like really a war to castrate men out here, man. Sigma Jones, salute to you, brother. That brother has a channel as well. He deals a lot with like the breakdown of the black family, eugenics and dysgenics. So y'all go check out Sigma Jones' channel. He says, always better news from content brothers here than mainstream media. Salute. Appreciate you, man. Y'all go support that brother Sigma Jones. So Turbato says, it's crazy how Tupac Shakur's mother made him read all of these hateful black feminist books. I mean, as long as from what I've heard about Tupac, though, he read a lot of books, right? Because you got to remember that his family and his father was in the Black Panthers. So he had both sides of the equation. Yeah, he read the feminist literature, which is good. You got to read your opponent's literature. It's like going into a football game. If you could get a hold of the enemies and the opposition's playbook and study the game film, why wouldn't you? Ask the Houston Astros and New England Patriots about that. But the more information that you have on the opposition, the better. So I actually think that Tupac reading the feminist books was great. In fact, there's this clip on YouTube of Tupac where he actually laid out how the American black woman on average prefers thug dudes. You should watch that video on Tupac when he was like 18 years old or 19 or something. He was talking about how he created the image of Tupac. Like Tupac was a character. The gangster rapper Tupac was literally, he said himself, a character that he created to get laid. Real shit. He said it himself. He said he actually created the character of Tupac the gangster. They got him killed and he's dead now because of that character. But that wasn't really who he was. He was a very bright, well-read, militant dude. But he said that to get laid, he had to create a thug image. So you guys check that out, man. Tupac that you saw on Death Row and all of that, Me Against the World, that was not Tupac, man. He said it himself that he did it to get laid. And that tells you a lot because he grew up during the 70s and 80s. And it tells you how things had changed from what the standard of black masculinity needed to be just to be valued among the black majority. Tupac himself said that being well-read, being a black militant guy was not enough. You need to be a thug and a gangster to get laid in 1980s, 1990s America. That was his own words, and you can go search for the video yourself. So I think it's a good thing that he was reading that literature, and I think it's a good thing that we're reading the literature. because you have to know the other side's talking points better than they do. Once you know their talking points, then you can now focus on strengthening your own talking points. Because so what happens often in these conversations, we have these one-sided conversations where it's just about what we know. But what happens when you step into the arena and you know more about the opposition side than they do? That's almost like being able to read their mind and think before them. That's why boxers and basketball coaches make their teams go over footage and video highlights and things like that to look at the tendencies of the opposition. For me, I'm trying to arm every free-thinking brother with the information that I read about on a daily basis. And that's why as I go through learning how to create websites, that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to focus on my own personal website, is because brothers always ask me about books and articles that I read. So I'm going to create like a site, hopefully by December, where it'll be like a source for brothers to always know that they can go to read about certain politics, law, psychology, relationships, and business on the site that I'm planning to create at the end of the year. So that's coming soon. But I'm just getting started learning like coding, and I have no experience with coding. So it's going to take me probably 6 months just to get the basics down. And I figure by December, I can actually, develop my own site, and it'll be like a resource so that when YouTube kicks people like me off, you'll know where to go. So I already got the website and everything. So just stay tuned for that. I'll talk more about that in the summer when I'm ready to, actually start the coding process. But so the brother Scott Haywood says, do you have a Patreon account? Hey, Scott, man, I just started doing this back in June. So I haven't even reached the level of doing Patreon yet. I actually want to get my own website before I do anything related to like a Patreon, because I would like to connect it to a website where brothers can have a space off of YouTube. And if they like what I'm talking about, they know where to find the kind of conversation they can have. So I haven't even gotten to that point yet, man. I haven't even been doing this long enough for that yet. But if I do get something like that, I'll definitely let you know, brother. Turbato says, try Notepad++. Well, actually, I'm actually learning WordPress right now. That's what I'm learning first, because you needed the least amount of experience to deal with the web development versus like pure coding using Python and stuff like that. That's more like the pure coding. But to do like what I'm trying to do, all you need is like a good foundation in WordPress and their plugins and themes and things like that. So that's kind of like my little goal for the year. I got 2 goals this year: one, to create my website, and then to take a foreign vacation. So those are like my 2 major goals for the year. And my reward for learning WordPress and developing my own website skills will be taking a nice 2-week-long vacation somewhere. So Wacky World says, we did the guy a favor because that video currently has the most views. I'll be waiting for your future content on it. Speaking of SKC, I guess. See. So Evan Duncan says, it's sports, study the opponent inside and out, and you can defeat them. Absolutely. Because again, remember, we already know that we got one thing in our favor already that we've refuted. They say black men don't read. They actually, truly, truly believe that, man. And if you don't read, you're going to have a lot of problems with abstract thinking. And they understand that. Because a lot of your abstract thinking comes from reading, especially when you're reading books without pictures, because you have to do a lot of visualization. You see what I'm saying? So us actually going through the Combahee River collective statement, you got to ask yourself, I bet you there's people out there with PhDs in social science that have never read that statement that we're all reading right now. That's why I keep telling brothers, when they say it's a foregone conclusion, I disagree. I think that we're just getting started, man. We're just getting started with these digital academies is what I call it. What we started to create is our own digital academies, unlike anything that ever existed since ancient history. Because back in the day, before universities and colleges, all you had was like a few intelligent people that would walk around, start debates, and then other people would see that person talking, and they would just kind of gather around in the park and listen to this wise person or this informed person. That ended up becoming universities eventually. That ended up turning into permanent schools. But it all started off with just one dude learning something, sitting around asking people if they know about it. More people saying, hey, that dude over there knows about how to plant that tree over there. Then next thing you know, he had like 500 people he needed a place to bring them into. That's how universities started. We're actually reverting back in a way to that. The traditional model of learning is dead. The traditional school model, brick and mortar, is dying. And the digital classroom is becoming the actual classroom that people can apply in their real lives. So It's just a theory, but we'll see how things develop over the next decade. But I have a feeling that more and more learning will not be done in a traditional brick and mortar classroom, and more people in these spaces will actually be as informed as your professors were 20 or 30 years ago. So if you took like the year 2000, right, and what professors that were teaching college students knew, I bet you your rank and file, digitally educated person will know as much as a professor did 20 years ago. So we're destroying the whole model with these conversations. Because again, they had these mediums between you and the information, the college and the media. Oh, well, you don't have a PhD like this person. You don't have a degree like this person. Well, what happens when I can actually get on stage with that PhD and run circles around him? Now, what are you going to do? That's the moment that we're in now. So shout out to the brother Tyrone Miles. He says, keep the smoke coming, Sigma. Hey, man, I'll keep sharing as long as y'all keep listening, brother. Zachary Williams says, I am an independent conservative black man, not a XX conservative Republican. Yeah, I think a lot of black men are saying that they're defining themselves as independent conservatives. And that's something that we all have to develop over the next couple of years, our own agenda and our own take on any kind of philosophy, because the black man's take is always going to have a different spin to it. And I ran into that with the libertarian literature and with some of the libertarian academics, that it doesn't really, it's some holes and gaps that are specific to black men that we're going to have to fill ourselves. But that's our responsibility. So I'm gonna read this last comment and go back to this last paragraph of this statement. Turbattle says the modern school system has been regulatory, captured by entryism and propaganda. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wacky World says, remember the rate of homeschooling has increased within the past couple of years due to the internet. Therefore, the growth of the digital academy has already started. Yes, sir. Absolutely. We're actually going back to that model. And now what Betsy DeVos and Trump are doing, they're actually paying parents to do homeschooling and create their own charter schools now. Because Betsy DeVos is a big charter school person, the Secretary of Education. So they're actually going to be giving like a $30,000 check to families that are willing to educate their children in certain places. So you guys might want to look into that. They got these vouchers that they're trying to create for homeschooled children, where whatever you were paying in taxes to the public school system, they're trying to give that back directly to the parents so that they can have the resources to do homeschooling. And I think that now that you have this digital space, you're going to have people homeschooling their children, and then they're going to do like teleconferencing like we're doing right now. That will become the new standard of learning because we actually have control over it instead of having to go before a board of educators that wants to castrate you. So that's actually a big movement going on right now. So more black people, I hope, get on that train. So let's get back to this this third plank, because there's 4 planks. Bring that screen back up. So, all right, here's the third plank. Problems in organizing black feminists. So now they're doing some troubleshooting in how they're going to go about organizing these feminists and black women. During our years together as Black Feminist Collective, we have experienced success and defeat, joy and pain, victory and failure. We have found that it is very difficult to organize around black feminist issues, difficult even to announce in certain contexts that we are black feminists. So I guess back in 1978, there was much more resistance to these feminists from black people because you had more strong black families back then, and they saw the danger of these women at that time. We have tried to think about the reasons for our difficulties, particularly since the white women's movement continues to be strong and to grow in many directions. In this section, we will discuss some of the general reasons for the organizing problems we face, and also talk specifically about the stages in organizing our own collective. Now I'm going to fast forward through this one because it's kind of longer, but I just want to get to the main point of the third plank. So I'm going to go with what the main point of the third plank was. In the fall 1978, when some members returned, we experienced several months of comparative inactivity and internal disagreements, which we were first conceptualized as lesbian straight split. So apparently back in 1970s, 74 to 78, they were doing all of this think tanking, and there was a split between the straight black women and the lesbian black women. So one of their goals has been to merge the interest of the quote unquote straight black woman into the lesbian woman. That's why we have a quarter of black women in 2020 declaring themselves bisexual. That was one of the goals of the Combahee River Collective, was to merge the interest of the heterosexual woman, which was actually against her interest, because the heterosexual woman wants to be with the heterosexual man, which creates the heterosexual traditional family. The lesbian has a problem with that. She said it herself. but which were also the result of class and political differences. During the summer, those of us who were still meeting had determined the need to do political work and to move beyond consciousness raising and serving exclusively as an emotional support group. At the beginning of 1976, when some of the women who had not wanted to do political work and who also had voiced disagreements stopped attending of their own accord, we again looked for a focus. We decided at that time, with the addition of new members, to become a study group. So now here's where we get like the think tank that developed. Just like we're having a study group right now, they developed a study group to go over different kind of literatures and different kind of narratives with each other. They found that as like a common ground with the straight woman. So she says, we had always shared our reading with each other. And some of us had written papers on Black feminism for a group discussion a few months before the decision. We began functioning as a study group and also began discussing the possibility of starting a Black feminist publication. So now you see how they first started off as just like a bunch of women meeting together to talk about their own personal struggles. Then they developed a study group to concentrate their focus on the literature and master the literature. Then they got their disagreements. Then they focused on common interests versus their disagreements. Then they started looking at how to publish their conversations together. So this is kind of how they developed during the 70s. And they said, we had a retreat in the late spring, which provided a time for both political discussion and working out interpersonal issues. Currently, we are planning together a collection of Black feminist writing. We feel that it is absolutely essential to demonstrate the reality of our politics to other Black women, and believe that we can do this through writing and distributing our work. The fact that individual Black feminists are living in isolation all over the country, that our own numbers are small, and that we have some skills in writing, printing, and publishing makes us want to carry out these kinds of projects as a means of organizing Black feminists as we continue to do political work in coalition with other groups. So I'm gonna stop there for the third plank and check the chat one more time. Then I'm gonna do the final plank because the most powerful stuff is in that final plank, number 4. So I just want to see what you guys have to say. See. But yeah, man, this thing has been in play for 50 years or so, man. We just didn't know about it. And they actually understood quite well that their interest with the heterosexual Black woman was not the same. So they had to find out a plan to bring her into the fold. The Black lesbians, she herself said they are Black lesbians. So that was their goal, man. Bring these Black women to heel. Isn't that what Hillary Clinton said with the super predators? We need to bring them to heel. So the feminists said we have to find out a way to destroy these this patriarchal Black family that they claimed was run by Black men that called them smart ugly. So let me see what you all have to say. Then I'll get back to that last plank and we'll close it out. But I definitely want to show this statement because it's been hidden, man. Many of us have taken social sciences classes in high school and college, and some of you brothers and sisters out there that's listening, y'all actually have PhDs and y'all didn't even know about this. Because they again, I was surprised when this woman came out of the shadows. So I'm like, who is this Black feminist lesbian supporting Bernie Sanders? And then she said she coined the term identity politics. Here, all of us is thinking that identity politics just meant non-white male patriarch, but it never included anyone but the Black woman. It was her liberation, she calls it, from the oppression of white male patriarchy and the alleged Black male patriarchy. So she says, you guys can't even front. These women have been putting us to shame these last few decades without they work together, organize their code. Absolutely. They've won that battle the last 40 years. They've thrown Black men completely under the bus. Black man gets blamed for everything, man. Jersey Hammer says, what does Black conservatism look like and how does that gain power by getting voting power nationally and locally? I don't think we 100% know what Black conservatism looks like 100%, because I would be what you would call like a independent with a capital I and a libertarian with a lowercase L. That's how I would define my ideology and my political philosophy and political agenda or whatnot. So if I went down a list of different important political issues, you'd be very shocked at how I think about something completely different on each independent issue. So like if you're talking about gun rights, I may think one thing. If you're talking about abortion, I may think something else. If you're talking about Medicare for all, you know, so it's like my views are all across the political spectrum. So I just say I'm an independent with a capital I and a libertarian with a lowercase L. Turbato says the Black conservatism is a hedge against cultural Marxism. That's interesting. Blackheart says, if I sound like I mean be like the white conservatives, I apologize because I don't support them even a little bit. I'm for us being morally conservative for our own benefit only. Excellent analysis. You're opening up a lot of eyes, bro. Appreciate that, DJ. Sir Trix-a-Lot, y'all go support the brother Sir Trix-a-Lot. He's like our in-house counsel for everything related to like pay for play. And he's always talking about like the different aspects of prostitution, legalization, difference between that and decriminalizing it, sex work, etc. So he's the guy to go talk to about that. So go check him out at Trick Lessons on YouTube. He says, I would loosely call myself a libertarian. Yeah, that's why I say libertarian with a lowercase L, because I have some conflicts with libertarians, and I've talked to some of their white academics, and I'll let you guys know more about that in the future as I have more conversations with the white academics that promote libertarianism. So I'll try to get one more before I read this last paragraph, because I got to get moving. I'm hungry. You know, I haven't had no lunch yet. So I'm going to get that last paragraph in, that last plank, because it's the most powerful one. And then I'm going to let y'all get back to work and go get me something to eat, man. So Urban Warlock, he says, as an older brother, I am so overwhelmed hearing you young cats picking up the mantle of black manhood. Your bold voices give hope for the future of our sons. Thank you. Appreciate you, Urban Warlock. Hey, man, we're just trying to rediscover history. That's all. Unlike you older brothers that lived through it, we didn't live through it, but we're gonna follow that trail of crumbs. That's what we're trying to do. Before that election comes, the nomination in July and the election in November, we will have followed those crumbs back to the source of all this black dysfunction over the last 60 years. So he already did that, was the 30% base he got in so many of those primaries, but that is not enough to win. So he does have to play to a certain extent to the moralist neocon types. Okay. That was someone else. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get back to this last plank, because this is the most powerful part of the Combahee River Collective Statement and the Declaration of Independence of the Black Woman, being led by the Black Feminist and the Black Lesbian in 1978. Consider this to be the sexual contract from the Black women 10 years before Dr. Carol Pateman's sexual contract. That's what's so powerful about it. They was on it 10 years before the white women were. So let's get back to this final plank, because I'm going to get me a nice diner cooked steak and eggs. So plank number 4 of the Combahee River Collective Statement, Black Feminist Issues and Projects. During our time together, we have identified and worked on many issues of particular relevance to Black women. The inclusiveness of our politics makes us concerned with any situation that impinges upon the lives of women, third world, and working people. We are, of course, particularly committed to working on those struggles in which race, sex, and class are simultaneous factors in oppression. We might, for example, become involved in workplace organizing at a factory that employs third world women, or picket a hospital that is cutting back on already inadequate health care to a third world community, or set up a rape crisis center in a Black neighborhood. Organizing around welfare and daycare concerns might also be a focus. The work to be done and the countless issues that this work represents merely reflect the pervasiveness of our oppression. Issues and projects that collective members have actually worked on are sterilization, abuse, abortion rights, battered women, rape, and healthcare. We have also done many workshops and educationals on Black feminism on college campuses and at women's conferences, and most recently for high school women. So that was part of their plan, to push their movement through academia. One issue that is of major concern to us and that we have begun to publicly address is racism in the white women's movement. So they've been going back and forth with these white women for 50 years as well. And that's why the white women are discarding them and disassociating from them in 2020. As Black feminists, we are made constantly and painfully aware of how little effort white women have made to understand and combat their racism, which requires, among other things, that they have a more than superficial comprehension of race, color, and Black history and culture. Eliminating racism in the white women's movement is by definition work for white women to do, but we will continue to speak and demand accountability on this issue. And this is the last paragraph, but I think it wraps it up nicely. In the practice of our politics, we do not believe that the end always justifies the means. Many reactionary and destructive acts have been done in the name of achieving correct political goals. As feminists, we do not want to mess over people in the name of politics. We believe in collective process and non-hierarchical distribution of power within our own group and in our vision of a revolutionary society. We are committed to a continual examination of our politics as they develop through criticism and self-criticism as an essential aspect of our practice. In her introduction to Sisterhood is Powerful by Robin Morgan, she writes, I haven't the faintest notion what possibly revolutionary role white heterosexual men could fulfill, since they are the very embodiment of reactionary vested interest power. And she ends it with, as Black feminists and lesbians, we know that we have a very definite revolutionary task to perform, and we are ready for the lifetime of work and struggle before us. So there you have it, people. That is the Combahee River Collective Statement from 1978. The organization was founded by Barbara Smith, a current cheerleader for Bernie Sanders and his communist movement. But, that was a lot. That's a lot for you all to think about, man. A lot for everyone to think about. And I suggest that you all go read it for yourself because, that second reading will be important. And the reason that I wanted to read this is because I'll be hosting a panel with MOT and a couple more people on March 1st. I believe it's going to be at like 12 Central Time. So somewhere between, I'll put up a flyer for it because I haven't decided on noon or 1 p.m., but it'll be either noon or 1 p.m. Central Time on March 1st. And we're going to be talking about the splintering of Black American. And it's important that you guys have this piece of information because we're following the breadcrumbs back to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act to 2020, where we're at today. So it's going to be a good conversation. And I just wanted to put that Combahee River Collective Statement out there so that you all would know that, hey, when we talk about the Black woman's first movement, that isn't something that we just talked about. Oh, Prince Jaren, yes, I do got the Daughters of the Trade book. I definitely got that right now. I just got it, I believe, on Tuesday. So I'm going to start reading that next week. But I'm kind of focused on this splintering of Black American conversation for the next week. So I won't be back on here until that panel on March 1st. But it's going to be good, man. So I wanted to put this out here and give you guys this information so that you can go reread the statement for yourself when you have time. But I wanted a digital record of it. And I think it'll add a lot to that discussion because we didn't get to this place where there's 4 Black Americas by accident. There were specific policies, there were specific contracts shred, new ones written, and there was a lot of money got funneled to places that never got to the place where it was supposed to go. So we're gonna really get it in on March 1st. So I'm gonna read a couple more comments before I get out of here. But hopefully you guys felt that you learned something from that declaration of the Black woman's first movement. So King 44 Cobra says, peace, appreciate you, bro, for your support and your attention. That was a hard read, but we still got to do the work, man. Whether we like doing the reading or not, whether we like listening to the arguments or not, because it makes your skin crawl and the hair stand up on your back, we have to learn these anti-Black narratives better than the Black misandrists out there. No one should be more of an expert on Black misandry than the Black man in America. Dr. Phoenix said that's all bullshit. All these Black females in healthcare as physicians and nurses, and the health outcomes for Black women are worse than they've ever been, rivaling developing nations and pre-Civil War era. Well, see what it is, man. They were more focused on getting the bag than actually being true scholars, being innovative. They just was trying to get paid, man. They like the status and the title more than actually being like, pioneers in opening up new fields related to the Black woman's health. They don't want to do that. They leave that to the white women and the white men that they say that they hate so much, and the Black men. They just want the title of position and the status and the check that comes with it. They don't want the other responsibility of actually being innovative, curing things, most of these women. They just like the status that comes with it and the power. That's why you're not seeing them do what you're saying, Dr. Phoenix. Jersey Hammer says, I agree with you. We do need a fight to fight against socialism. I think we shoot ourselves in the foot because we conflate everything back to race, which brings shit back to collectivism. Yeah. But more and more we're seeing, based on that Eugene Robinson model, the 4 Black Americas, and we're going to get into that on March 1st. But that's just a lot of rhetoric at this point, man. This thing has been going on for 60 years, and we just entered a phase where we went beyond Black flight to the suburbs to now we're getting Black flight to create their own situation and even flights overseas now. So that's what's different about today now. We're entering a new stage now, and that's probably going to be called like the 5th Black America. The global Black man. See, that's going to be the next phase of all this. Because remember, Eugene Robinson made his theory came from 2010. We got a whole decade of things that happen, especially in terms of this technology that we're using, and also in terms of the next census. But the next phase is going to be, how does the country deal with Black men actually becoming global citizens? I think that's going to be the next phase that just hasn't been talked about yet. So we'll have that discussion on March 1st as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump off here, man. I appreciate you all coming through. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, and I'm about to go feed myself and hydrate. I hope that you all have a fantastic Friday and a wonderful weekend. Like I said, you know, you guys got those tax returns coming in. Try to do something smart with your money. And if you're going on spring break, man, have a great time. But I'll be back on March 1st. Be checking for the ad. I haven't decided if it'll be noon Central Time or 1 p.m., but it'll probably be noon on March 1st. So just check for that. I'll put that ad out at least 2 days ahead of schedule. So with that said, everyone have a great weekend. I'm out.